When Frank McCourt sat down to write the memoir of his childhood in Ireland, he could not have imagined the magnitude of its success. In addition to the Pulitzer Prize for biography, Angela's Ashes was named the best nonfiction book of 1996 by Time magazine and was the editor's choice for best book by the New York Times Book Review. It has sold nearly 1 million copies in the United States alone and has been at the top of the bestseller list for over 8 months. All this from a story with the humblest of beginnings. As he writes, worse than the ordinary miserable childhood is the miserable Irish childhood, and worse yet is the miserable Irish Catholic childhood. I am pleased to have the man who wrote those words on this broadcast, and with my apologies for not having him here earlier. Frank, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Charlie.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
This is just a phenomenon, is it not?
Yeah, it's too much. It's all. Sometimes I think it approaches the absurd. It's beyond the American dream. It's celestial, as I met E.L. Doctorow one night. He said the two celestial events, the Hail Bop and the Angela's Ashes. It just, and sometimes I feel a bit guilty. You know, when you grow up as an Irish Catholic, there's always the element of guilt there. Yeats said once time that in being Irish, you know that in moments of great joy, you're comforted by the thought that tragedy lurks around the corner.
So do you wait for the train that's about to hit you?
I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting because for the past 2 years, only good things have happened to me. And you have to become, like an athlete, you have to condition yourself to this kind of thing. Ever since this book came out, ever since it was bought. In July 1995.
Now, what's extraordinary about it is two things. One is the story itself, that it had such a hold on the imagination, because this is a tale of woe.
Yeah, sure is.
Secondly, is your life. This is the first book.
Yeah.
Number one.
After all those years of teaching.
You were high school?
Yeah.
High school teacher for what? How many years?
27 years.
27 years.
In various three high schools in New York.
You give new definition to late bloomer.
Oh, yeah. I even had lunch with Brendan Gill, and he wrote a book on late bloomers.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he was checking me out or something for his late bloomer book, but I was thinking maybe 3 or 4 books down the road I should write one called Late Bloomer.
Angela's Ashes is about what?
It's about a period, the time period is the Depression, beginning in the Great Economic Depression in the United States, where my mother and father met, and they had me, and then they had my brother Malik. There was a succession of children. 6 children in 5.5 years, which is monstrous.
One set of twins.
One set of twins, yeah. The little girl died in Brooklyn, and my mother fell apart. My father was drinking, so we went back to Ireland, to Limerick, which was a ridiculous...
You were 4 then?
I was 4, yeah. A ridiculous decision to go from the frying pan into the fire, to go to Limerick, of all places. Which was, it never knew anything but depression.
Yeah, Brooklyn was tough. Limerick
was beyond the beyond. Limerick was the outer depths of of Calcutta, except that Calcutta at least is warm and dry. So my mother had twins, and the twins died the year we arrived in Limerick. The twins died, one in May and one in November.
So that's 3 dead.
That's
so
3
far.
dead, and another one about to be born. She conceived in the month of the first child. The first twin died. And that child was born in February. Then 4 years later, my youngest brother, Alfie, was born. So in 10 years, from 1930 to 1940, she had 7 children and lost 3. In the meantime, my father's drinking, an occasional job, compounded by the fact that he came from the north of Ireland. He had a north of Ireland accent, and he's in the south of Ireland. Most people wouldn't understand, well, so because the north of Ireland, you talk like that, you know, and everybody knows you're from the north of Ireland, and you're in Limerick where you talk somewhat like me. Yeah. So he was an outsider. He was always an outsider, and it was very hard for him to get a job. With the result, between the drinking and the difficulty of getting a job, we sank lower and lower and lower in the economic scale.
And when he got a job, he spent the paycheck at the local bartender. Yeah.
He would last for 3 weeks, maybe, and be a good boy, but then the third Friday night, he always fell apart, and he had to go to the pub. Then he went to England, 1941, because the English needed Irishmen over there to work in their factories and to join their forces. So he went over there and worked in the factories. So most of the men going to England in those days sent home money. He didn't. He spent all his money. So it got even worse, to the point where we were evicted from the hovel we were in. Yeah. So we went from one hovel to another hovel. And all that kept us alive was whatever welfare the Irish government was dispensing and the charity of the St.
Your mother was begging.
Oh, she was begging, yeah. She was out. We used to have to go down to the dock road and pick lumps of coal off the road, get pieces of wood wherever we could, bits of paper to light the fire, that kind of absolutely basic existence.
And when the cold and the wet came?
When the cold and the wet came, we tried to get a fire going, but we'd go to bed early and all huddled together, the four brothers in one bed, which was collapsing anyway. It was a disaster of a bed, a half acre of hairs sticking up and fleas hopping all over you. It was. I don't know how we survived. You get up in the morning, you stick your foot out, and it was like going to the Arctic Circle.
How then do you feel about your father?
He had his demons. He had the disease of alcoholism. My brother Maliki has explained this disease to me. I don't accept it completely. Cancer is the disease. Which you can't walk away from. You can walk away from the drink. And I could never, I have one daughter, I could never have chosen the bottle over the daughter. Yeah. So it's not a question of forgiving him or anything like that. Forgiving people is a kind of a pompous activity, or accepting apologies is pompous. So there it is. This is what he did. I survived. We all survived, except for the ones who died. They didn't. And that was not directly attributable to his drinking. It was pure ignorance. Ignorance of bronchial problems.
And what did it do to you?
Living in that slum,
yeah.
Being under the power of the Catholic Church, the kind of schooling, we got brutal schoolmasters.
You came out with no love for the Jesuits.
No love for the church at all, as an institution. Occasional priests and nuns that I love and admire, but as an institution, I despise it because it presented a false front. You're supposed to fall in the way of Jesus, but they didn't.
Yeah, and they weren't there for you.
They weren't there. They never came near us. The priests never came near us. All they did was instill fear into us. They just ruled the country, but now it's falling apart there. With the result that I came out of Limerick, when I was growing up, because you're poor, you're deprived, you have no self-esteem. So when at 19 I arrived in New York, a shrinking violet.
And that's where this book ends.
Yeah.
When you arrive. And there'll be a sequel to this, picking up when you're 19, arriving in New York.
That's the idea.
You got to tell the story because it's all, I mean, let me talk about the writing of the book. Why not earlier? This powerful story. You hung around with writers all the time. Yeah. I mean, you were at the Lion's Head with guys that wrote.
Yeah, people like Pete Hamill and Joe Flaherty. But I was teaching five days a week, 5 classes a day, and you might have 170 kids every day, so there wasn't much time to write. I had to make a living, and I didn't have the self-esteem to make the big jump into writing. I'm quitting teaching. I'm going to move to the village. In those days, you could live in a place for $125 a month. I didn't have the self-confidence.
In your writing ability,
right? Yeah. Or in my story, this tale of misery. I didn't think it was marketable.
This story.
Yeah.
But you found out. I mean, so what did you find out? You found out, among other things, that there is significance in the insignificant.
Yeah. Well, that's what I discovered as a teacher. Everything that happened to me, every positive thing that happened to me, I discovered in standing in front of the kids. I learned whatever I know. I learned standing, and in the 42nd Street Library, I learned nothing as a college boy. Going to the 42nd Street Library and being a teacher, these are my 2 universities.
What did the kids teach you?
They helped me open. They would ask me questions. Well, hey, first of all, they would ask, "Yo, teach, you Scotch or something?" No, I'm Irish. You like to drink? No, right. You're going to be here, Paddy? Is there? I'll be here. And they were always disappointed that I didn't adhere to the stereotype. That I worked against it. So, and then when I moved to Stuyvesant High School, where the kids were not brighter than the other ones, but they were more inclined to open up, more analytical. They all came from the Upper West Side. Right. And they were all in therapy and suggesting that I go and do likewise. So I learned from these class discussions. I wasn't teaching. I was learning most of the time.
They were teaching you when you were teaching them.
Yeah, I was learning from them about how. And They detected the false notes that I sent out from time
But
to
did
time.
they bring out of you the stories that you had to tell?
Yeah.
Like, where'd you come from? What was your father like? And
right. What were your teachers like? What was it like in school? What kind of music did you like when you were growing up? And when I was growing up, I didn't like Irish music. I used to listen to Armed Forces Network, Louis Armstrong, and Billie Holiday.
You like jazz?
Yeah, I love jazz. Yeah. And now I love Irish music. I've learned to love it lately.
Your dad, for all of the alcoholism, for all of what he did to the family, imbued you with a sense of story.
Yeah. Story and history. And sorrow, I suppose, of Ireland's long, sad history. We knew all the ballads. We didn't go to school for poetry. It was in the house. It was in my father's head. He recited. Everybody around us could recite yards and yards of poetry and then burst into song. So the literature, there was no such thing as a separate literature that you studied when you went to school. And we knew the English stuff, too.
All the greats.
All the greats, yeah.
Your dad would read to you in the morning, get up and make tea.
He'd sit by the fire, he'd make the fire. It was difficult to get the fire going. And he would tell me about the great Irish epic heroes, the mythological heroes like Cuchulainn and Finn McCourt. And then, of course, the men who gave their lives, who did their bit, the uprising of 1916.
You finally put it to paper because you gained the confidence, or you finally said, if I don't do this, I might as well not live?
Well, I was married to Ellen in August 1994. And there was something about that cleared the decks for me. There's certain little incidents like that was a big incident. But then I have a granddaughter.
That was in '94 you married Ellen, but you've been with her for...
Yeah, since '89.
Yeah, because you left teaching in '87.
Yeah.
To do what?
10 years ago. Because I was beginning to repeat myself to have adventures. Yeah. That's what I told the kids. Why are you leaving? I said, I have to have adventures. So I went and had adventures.
You were about 40...
I was 55.
55.
Yeah. And I did a two-man show with my brother, and we went around the country. So I had adventures with Malachi. And I stayed in San Francisco for a year and a half. I had my teenage daughter, who was a deadhead, and I was trying to get her to go through school. That was another the great American struggle, to get her away from Jerry Garcia. He had such a hold on her.
So you went to all the deadheads and then...
Well, I
went to see the Grateful Dead play all the time? And
I went, the only time
she did.
She did, yeah. She followed them around the country.
Yeah.
And one time I went looking for her in Philadelphia. I found her in the Spectrum Stadium.
Yeah.
So that was my one and only Dead concert. Though I liked their music.
Yeah.
I wasn't sorry when Jerry passed on.
Now that so then you write it.
Yeah.
You knew it was good? You had a sense that...
No. I knew it was okay, but I didn't know it was going to have this kind of impact or reputation. I said to my wife, Ellen, this is a modest book. It'll be modestly received. I thought, in my arrogance, the New York Times Sunday Book Review has a section called Noted Briefly.
Yeah, I know.
Briefly noted.
Sure.
A couple of paragraphs. And that's
what you thought you'd get?
They'd say it would be charming and lyrical.
It's almost like seen in passing.
Yeah, right. Bye.
Yeah.
It would be. That's what they say about all Irish books, charming and lyrical.
Yeah.
I wanted urban and gritty.
When was the first recognition that you had something that was special?
When my friend Mary Breasted, who's a writer, took it to Molly Friedrich, who's an agent, and they both loved it, and they took it to Nan Graham at Scribner, and she loved it, and that was it. The trinity of women. but before that, there was Ellen, who said to me one day, I wrote it in Pennsylvania, she said, this is going to be sensational. And I got such a fit of anxiety, I nearly fell apart. I couldn't understand. What do you mean it's sensational? Sensational, she said. But I didn't believe it. And then the New Yorker picked it up last June and ran a huge excerpt. And that's when it started.
The talk began.
The talk began. The buzz, as they say.
The buzz, as they say. And then it hit, and everybody was talking about it, and then the Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
How has it all changed you? Well, first of all, everybody calls you up now to have anything having to do with Ireland. They call you up as the resident expert.
I'm the expert on everything. And I'm getting an expertise on education because I'm a teacher. They want me to go to this conference or that conference, speak here and speak there. Yeah. So I realize I'm a great learner now. I became a great learner when I was a teacher. I'm learning now that you have to learn. This is a situation. It's like going into a marriage or a relationship, and you have to look at it and say, what's going on here, and you have to manage it. Because initially you're on a treadmill or a roller coaster, and I could go around for another 2 years and say, hi, I wrote Angela's Ashes, but no, I have to get back to work.
Why do you think this has done so well?
It's old-fashioned. It's a family story, and a lot of it echoes a lot of things I think that people have heard from their parents, whether they're American or Jewish or Irish or whatever they are. Depression stuff, the so-called, I hate that word, dysfunctional family, the alcoholic father, the aspect of religion, the power of religion, how it makes you feel guilty. And I think the style is straightforward. I learned the style, I think, from teaching.
That's what I want to ask. Where did you learn to write?
I learned. I have a granddaughter. She was about 2 when she visited me, when I was beginning, and I realized I was watching her learn how she would take a word and put it away in her head. Chair. Her name is Chiara. Chair, Chiara, and she said chair, and that word was into her memory bank. And how when you talk to teenagers, when you're a teacher, you have to be clear and direct and simple because they have no patience. And for 27 years, I had to be clear and direct.
Angela's Ashes, a memoir, winner of the Pulitzer Prize in 1996 and a lot of other awards. We'll be right back. Stay with us.